Well, thank you so much. It's great to be with everyone today. And from around the world, this is a, and just appreciate being here with you. As I was thinking about our webinar today, I wanted to have the opportunity to bring two pieces together. Number one is to talk about some important business concepts that I know that we're all focused on in wanting to maximize the success of our organizations, but then also to bring some very practical pieces to play that that I think we'll be able to take away and bring back to our businesses. So to start out, let's see if I can. There we go. John Rockefeller said, "I have long been profoundly convinced that in the very nature of things, employers and employees are partners, not enemies, that their interests are common, not opposed, that in the long run, the success of each is dependent upon the success of the other." And when I think about this, unfortunately, all too often, I think that the relationship between employer and employee can be a little rocky, sometimes adversarial. But I think this quote is particularly important when we think about performance management and helping employees to maximize their potential within the organization. And so if we keep this in mind, that we're working together for a common goal, we are striving in the same direction, then we're going to have the right mindset as we enter this, not only from an organization standpoint, but also from an employee standpoint. So our agenda for today, we're going to be covering several, what is performance management, and just do an overview of that concept. Then we're going to be talking about the phases of performance management, being planning, coaching, and then the actual formal evaluation, and getting into detail on each one of these, what they mean, why are they important, and how do we leverage each one of these for business success. Next, we're going to talk about just the review in particular. So this is going to be very practical, some things that you would want to be thinking about as you are doing performance evaluations and potentially launching these within your organization. Some practical steps again on administering the organization or the evaluation. We're going to be sharing some tips and some techniques on how to make that experience impactful and the best possible. And then we'll wrap up with some action items and some final comments. As a PhD and as a helper of people, I always give homework. So we're going to be wrapping up some time today with that. So let's talk about performance management. From a definition standpoint, performance management is using leadership to drive the process of setting individual business expectations, measuring work behaviors and results, and providing feedback to individuals in order to maintain and improve performance. And so if we kind of unpackage this just a little bit, the concept of leadership goes through everything that we do from a performance management standpoint. It's helping the individual understand what their role is, setting those objectives and goals for them within the context of the business. So it's not about it's not purely isolated to the individual. It is the individual in the context of business, and how are we providing feedback and guidance to help to maximize both. There's obviously a measurement component. So how are we quantifying the performance and the behaviors that we're seeing, and then providing guidance and feedback to help folks stay on track and on target with that performance. So performance management is built on the relationship that you establish with each team member. This relationship should be deeply grounded in respect and trust. I think that this concept is particularly important. If we view performance management just as a process instead of a piece of a relationship to deepen our communication, deepen our understanding, then we've really missed a core piece of value that comes with performance management for business success. So the purpose of performance management, if we really kind of boil this down into 6 different areas, it's number one, to develop and retain our team members by identifying the areas in which to grow. It's investing back in them, helping them to see where they add value and building them up. You know, I've often heard the quote, what if we invest in people from a development standpoint and they leave? But on the flip side, what if we don't invest in them and they stay? So we always want to be looking at this through the lens of how are we helping our team members to grow. Number two, it gives a formal process to measure team member performance. It gives us that structure, it gives us that continuity and that consistency that folks can expect, but then also ties back into our business success. The process sets aside time to establish goals for each team member. In the busyness of our lives, we continue to press forward, do so much. We're pressed in so many different directions, and performance management as a process gives us that time where we set aside a dedicated time of focus where we can really lean into performance and evaluate where we're at and where we need to go. Next, management should be providing feedback to team members on a consistent basis, and we're going to talk even more about this in the coaching phase of performance management. But if this is not part of the culture of your organization, an ongoing piece of the conversation and of process, then we're really missing the true value that comes in performance management. Next, for a supervisor committed to performance management, communication is enhanced. And you know, communication we've all heard is just so critically important, and is an area that oftentimes managers and supervisors and employees struggle. There's kind of a disconnect sometimes in our communication, and performance management gives a structure that can enhance that communication on a daily basis. And many people decisions are based on team member performance as measured by the performance management system. So promotions, opportunities for advancement, promotions either from a vertical standpoint, moving up, or horizontal, having the opportunity to do more things, be involved in more opportunities. All of those can be tied back into performance management as a evaluator of an individual's readiness for those next opportunities, but then also it provides the structure for a gap analysis to say, if this is where they want to be, what do we need to do to get them there? So again, performance management, a lot of purposes that touch a lot of different areas of our business. So if performance management helps achieve so many objectives, why do so many supervisors seem to dread participating in the process? You know, in my experience in working with organizations over the last 23, 24 years, that is a consistent theme. When we get to that moment in time where we're doing the annual evaluation, it just seems like the managers and supervisors are like, oh my goodness, do we have to do this again? You know, why do we have to do this? And I think that it really ties into some core pieces that if we focus on today, then it will make it easier for us moving forward. I think the first is just a reluctance sometimes to provide that honest, candid feedback. Sometimes, I believe as managers and supervisors, we're afraid that the feedback is not going to resonate with the individual, that we just don't know how to have those conversations. There's a fear that the team member will become defensive. If I provide some challenging feedback or some feedback that's an opportunity for improvement, will the team member embrace that, accept it, or will they disagree? Will it bring about conflict? So I think that there's a fear in managers and supervisors that that'll happen. Another thing is that the concern that the relationships with the team member will be damaged as a result of the feedback. So sometimes as managers, we want so much to build great relationships with those around us. We want to be connected with them in a personal way, not in an inappropriate way, but we like to have friendships with folks that we're associated with. And I think sometimes supervisors and managers think, gosh, if I provide that tough feedback to this individual, will it damage our relationship? Will we not be as close? And that stands in the way. And then last is not having specific examples to support performance feedback. As we go day by day through, sometimes we fall into a complacency of really taking a look at somebody's performance, being very specific in that, providing that feedback, and then when we get to the event of completing the performance evaluation, we know that there were some issues or some pieces that we wanted to address over the course of the evaluation period, but we can't remember what those were. Either good or bad. Once again, in performance management, it's so important to provide that balanced feedback. So I think that these four things are certainly some roadblocks that stand in the way and create anxiety at the very least when it comes to performance management. But what we're going to do today is talk about how to overcome these and put you in a position where you're able to leverage performance management in the best way possible. Research has consistently shown that a performance management system is the most influential driver of individual performance. The benefits clearly warrant our focus on nurturing the performance management system. So when we think about the individual in the context of the organization, them bringing the best of themselves and achieving the greatest success in their role as well as for the organization as a whole, we know that performance management has a huge impact on that. So if we can all agree, hopefully we can also then take the next steps on, let's create something that is going to be impactful and value added to our businesses in the area of performance management. So the benefits of performance management, it focuses on results rather than behaviors or activities. We need to tie this back in. What are the results that are coming from? We know that behaviors oftentimes drive results, but if we're not looking at those results, we may actually be incenting the wrong behaviors from a business standpoint. Number two is it aligns organizational activities and processes to the overall goals of the organization. Again, if we don't have that alignment with the overall business objectives with any people or human capital process that we put in place, then we're missing the mark. It reinforces accountability, and it drives that responsibility to the employee to take ownership of their career, to take ownership of their actions and behaviors, to take ownership of the results, and creates alignment for everyone across the company. It treats performance as an ongoing process rather than a one-time event. And you're going to hear me speak a lot about this, the importance of performance management being so integrated into the culture that it's something that we're just naturally doing every single day. And it helps to ensure equitable treatment of all employees. Consistent processes, consistent systems help us to create a consistency of experience for all of our employees. So your role in performance management. Number one is to develop strong relationships of mutual respect and trust. Again, going right back to that openness, that honesty, that heart of compassion, of really wanting to pour into the success of your employees. That is critical in performance management. Number two is to establish clear performance expectations. The more clear we are, the more crystallized the behaviors that we're looking for, the results that we're looking for, performance management is able to be all that much more effective. Number three, your responsibility is to observe and document behavior. So we always need to be looking at what are the things that the individual is doing that we can provide feedback on, that we can say, gosh, you know what, you really did outstanding with this conversation with this particular client. And these are the specific. you know what? I saw this conversation that you had. I think if you had done this differently and this differently, the outcome would have been better for you. So continuing to observe and document and then provide and receive feedback. Your role is also to coach your team members. And the coaching piece is something that is ongoing, a day in and day out process that provides that real-time feedback. And then last is to make accurate performance ratings. And there's some challenges that we sometimes face in providing that feedback in an accurate way. But if we are looking at specific behaviors, we have the ability to minimize some of those stumbling blocks and really give valued feedback that is going to tie into results. So always keep in mind the golden rules of performance management. And there are two critical golden rules that are so important. Number one is to be honest. You are doing a great disservice to your team members if you do not share information or if you don't completely share your expectations and feedback. You've got to be honest with them. Let them know exactly where they are, the great things that they're doing, the challenging things that they're doing, and make sure that you're having those open conversations. And number two is no surprises. Each day, your team members should be able to predict your response to a given situation based on the performance expectations that are communicated. And if they have done well, tell them. If they're not meeting your expectations, tell them. The key is don't wait until the review time to share your pleasure or disappointment with their performance. That continuous feedback is something that is so important. So the two golden rules: be honest every single day and no surprises as you're giving feedback every single day. So let's unpackage a little bit the three phases of performance management. The first is the planning phase. And planning essentially is the setting of the expectations and goals. It is a structured process where you're looking at what do I want to see in their behavior, what do I want to see in the results that they're delivering, and this is typically, in my experience, what I like to work with organizations with is it's a co-creation experience. So instead of the manager coming in and saying, this is what I want you to do, now go do it, the manager is sitting down with the employee and saying, okay, what are we going to work on together? What are the things that I need to be focused on? It creates a sense of alignment, and it also creates a sense of ownership for the employee to be part of the process. The second phase is coaching, and coaching is the year-long feedback process. And in my experience and in my work, it is the most important step in ensuring high performance. You can have all of the best plans, you can have all of the best objectives laid out, but if you're not coaching and providing that feedback on a consistent basis, eventually you'll drift away from what those objectives are. So it's the day in and day out feedback. And then the third phase is the actual evaluation. And this is the formal written documentation of performance. Typically, it occurs once a year, and it's a culmination of the first two steps. So it's the planning and the coaching that comes together that we're now providing feedback on in the evaluation. This cycle then continues. So we're evaluating, then we're moving back into planning. What are we going to be looking at over the next review period? We're continuing the coaching and then going back into the evaluation. So all of these working together help to create a strong process and system that helps individuals maximize their contributions to the company. So let's dig into this a little bit more. So in planning, in this phase, you and your team member work jointly to set objectives and to develop goals for the evaluation cycle. It's important that you develop the plan together. And I tell you, in my experience of speaking across the country and in working with organizations, oftentimes I'll ask the question, how many of you sit down and lay out your expectations and goals to your team member without them being part of that? And the vast majority really take more of a direction of their laying out the expectations and want the employee to drive to that. The reality is, if you are able to take the time, slow up just a little bit to co-create this or work together on the goals, it's going to be so much more effective. If the team member solely develops a plan, the goals may not align with the company or the department goals. And if you develop the plan, the team member may not be committed to completing the goals. That's why coming together is so important in this. So it's critical that you find a balance between a goal that's too easy and a goal that's impossible to achieve. And the best goal is one that is difficult yet attainable. It causes the employee to stretch, to grow beyond themselves, and to get even better. At this level, you will receive the most effective performance outcomes. So you want goals that the team member will be able to complete. Goals should be written on two different levels. The first level goals should match the requirements of the job in order for the team member to successfully complete their responsibilities. And so it's very focused on their actual role, their job description, their job responsibilities. And these are task focused and oftentimes deadline driven. But on the second level, the individual development plans are goals focusing on team member behaviors. And these tend to be more soft skills in order to influence career development and growth. So when we think about putting these goals together, I'm going to take us back to something we've probably all heard before, but it bears value in mentioning again, is the goals should be written in a SMART model to give a greater chance of completion. They need to be specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic, and time-bound. And just as means of review, when we think about specific, we need to ask ourselves the question, is it clear what the team member will deliver? Is there any question in the team member's mind about what you are looking for, what you have decided together needs to be accomplished? Number two, measurable. Is it clearly defined and understood by both you and your team member how the results will be measured? Do we know how we're going to evaluate if the team member has been successful in this or not? Number three is action-oriented. Have the action items been described clearly? Does the individual know exactly what they need to be doing from a behavior standpoint? Now, that's a little bit different than the specific of what is the result that we need to achieve. The action-oriented, what are the individual behaviors that I'm going to be doing? Fourth is realistic. Is it realistic to expect completion of this objective as it's written? Again, we want these to be stretch goals. So is it something that if they stretch beyond themselves, they can accomplish it, they can achieve this? Or is it something that's so far out of reach that motivation will actually be diminished and frustration will go up as a result of not being able to even reach the mark? And then last, time-bound. Does the objective include a specific date for completion? So that's something that oftentimes is missed. I've seen managers all too often say, in this area, to improve self-development by reading a book. Okay, so we've got a specific action that we're looking toward. It is action-oriented, but there's no time bound. So if we're able to say complete this within the next 4 weeks or the next 3 months, then that gives us a timeline that we need to focus on. The second phase of performance management is coaching. And I had mentioned before that this is the area that is really the most important and where you spend the majority of your time. When we think about the value of coaching and the importance of this, coaching is the day in and day out giving and receiving of feedback about how our team members are doing. Providing that feedback is a habit that each of us needs to develop. It's something that just becomes part of who we are. We're always thinking about it. We're always looking at situations that we can specifically call the employee out to say, let me give you some feedback on this. Let me tell you what I'm seeing. Great job. Great job. Or, you know, if you modify this just a little bit, I think you're going to be getting greater results. So the coaching is so critically important. So feedback, when we talk about feedback, what is feedback? It's defined as information about the past, delivered in the present, which may influence the future. And by giving feedback, you are actually sharing your observations and your expectations for the future. So hopefully, just even the concept of feedback is something that's a little bit more palatable for folks, but it is so critically important. Information about the past, delivered in the present, which may influence the future. So during this phase, you're responsible for documenting performance. And again, this is the coaching phase. So what are you seeing? Jotting down those little notes, writing those down so that you can help to remember for conversations. Number two, you're sharing and receiving information with your team members. So those constant conversations. As you are providing that feedback, there are some keys that we need to think about in helping to maximize the value of the coaching experience. First is pinpointing behaviors. And pinpointing is when we identify observable, specific behaviors or actions. And as you observe the performance of your team member, you want to ask yourself the following questions. Number one, what specifically do I see or hear that team member doing? Again, being very specific is critical to this. Number two, what is the specific behavior? If you were to sit down with the individual and show them a video, what would that video show them? In kind of thinking of it in that context where you can tell a story about what you have observed brings it more into a reality for them. And then how would a director instruct an actor to perform? And I really like kind of this idea as a creative anyway. I love that kind of the process of dreaming with this. So providing feedback on pinpointing these behaviors, if you were the director of the show and the employee was an actor, what would you tell them to do a little bit differently that would make that scene even better? So being very specific in that is going to allow the employee to take your feedback and apply it to their actions. Second piece is tracking performance. You want to keep a file that includes all the data you collected during the review period. You want to record this information as soon as possible so you don't forget. And I've often seen managers walk around with a little notebook with perforated pages that they can jot down notes on each person so that they're capturing it real time. Once you've completed the review cycle, the review period, you can destroy this information. So it's not something that you need to hold on to and keep because you've now taken that feedback and put it into a formal format for them. And then last, you want to instruct your team members to also keep track of performance data. And this is something that I've always done with folks that I've worked with and others that I've coached is help them to document the things that they're doing, jot notes on themselves so that we can have that open and very honest conversation. So in giving feedback, there are some do's and some don'ts with this. to help to create the conditions for the greatest success possible in those conversations. So do give balanced feedback. Give positive and negative. Give developmental as well as encouraging. Don't only provide negative or only positive feedback. You do want to be specific and tie directly into those behaviors, and don't be general. Folks don't have the ability to really wrap their head around what do I need to be doing differently if there's general comments like, you know what, you did great with that person. Thanks so much for all you do. Be specific in what you're seeing. You want to focus on observable behaviors instead of focusing on the personality of the individual. So again, we talked about how behaviors lead into results. You want to focus on 1 to 3 priorities, and don't provide everything you've documented. Folks don't have the ability to capture a significant amount of development and goals and objectives for performance improvement. We need to help them to really narrow that down. What are 1, 2, or 3 different areas that we can really focus on that if we knock it out of the park, then we're going to see even greater results? Do make it a positive experience, and don't make the session punishing. There are ways that you can provide valued feedback that is developmental, but then also make it a positive experience. Do own the feedback, and don't pass along ownership. This is something that is so critical. When you're providing feedback to someone, say, this is what I have observed, or this is what I have seen. Don't say, I heard this from somebody else and they think you should be doing something different. Okay? Own the feedback. Take responsibility for it, and you will be even more respected by the employee as you're having those conversations. And then last, do praise in public. Don't correct in public, always in private. So when you're out, if somebody does great, hey, thank you so much. Be very specific in how you're doing this, but make that an event around their team members. So team members actually see the validation of the behavior, and it helps to reinforce them to know, oh, if I do this as well, then it's going to be a positive experience. So just some keys on giving some feedback that could be important. Next is receiving feedback. So part of your responsibility is actually receiving feedback from the employee during this experience. So this information could be performance information that your team member has collected, responses to feedback that you're sharing, or simply your team member sharing his or her career or development goals. Again, it gets right back into that conversation mode and how are we building a relationship through the coaching experience. Next is listening, and feedback can be very difficult sometimes, but if you think about these 10 basic rules of listening, I think that you'll have the ability to be even more effective. So number one, you want to look at the person that's speaking to you. You want to ask questions. Stephen Covey says, seek first to understand, then to be understood. And if we listen with the heart of truly understanding, we'll be even more successful. Listen to the entire message and don't interrupt or become distracted. We also don't want to jump to conclusions. And if you don't understand something, ask for clarification. Sometimes we listen to respond instead of listening to understand. And when we do that, we oftentimes miss the true message that the individual is trying to communicate. We don't want to change the subject. Sometimes folks try to change the subject because it becomes uncomfortable. Don't change the subject. Be 100% committed to where you're at and what is being said so that you can truly understand. Next, we want to empathize, and empathy is putting yourself in the place of that individual. So what can you do to better understand their perspective? You want to respond verbally and non-verbally. So communicating that you are engaged with them, that you're committed to the conversation, helps to reinforce and validate the individual. And if you think you have a clear, if you think you have the message, repeat it back to ensure that the message is clear. So sometimes just by saying, here's what I believe I understand you're saying. If we repeat that back and the person can say, yes, that's correct, or no, actually I meant this, it again enhances our understanding. So listening is so important in this. Listening from the perspective of understanding. So the last phase of performance management are the actual evaluations. So this is the time of year that most people dread. But if you have set clear goals and shared progress during the course of the year, this step actually becomes the easiest. So as you prepare to write the evaluation, you want to review the goals that you and the team members set in the beginning of the process. You want to gather all the documents that you've accumulated. You want to show that you have a wealth of specific examples. Once you have all this information, you've got all of that together, now you're ready to start writing the evaluation. So in the writing of the evaluation, for many people, it can cause a lot of anxiety. And most of this anxiety involves completing the comment section. If you've properly gathered information during the coaching phase, though, this should no longer present a problem. And each evaluation is a little bit different. Typically, I take the approach of providing a rating of, however that's defined, typically a 4-point scale, 5-point scale with different definitions of performance that are tied to each one of those. And then there's a section, a narrative section, that provides justification and substantiation for those ratings. So the individual, if I say, you know what, in this area you met expectations, and here's the behavior that I saw that leads me to believe that you met expectations in this. So that's the connection between the rating and then the comment section. You know, I like Dilbert, and in this little comic strip it says, I got a text message from our boss, keep up work. And he asked, what does this mean? And Dilbert says, you just got your annual performance review. And this is something that we definitely want to avoid. We want to use those pinpointed examples. We want to use the specific feedback. We want to give the employees valuable information so that they can continue to stay on the right path and make the adjustments needed for their success as well as the organization's success. So even nice comments need to have more substance. So what are some strategies that we can use to increase accuracy on the evaluation? First, striving for accurate and fair evaluations is a significant component of performance management. When writing, there are steps that you can take to help to be even more accurate and provide that valuable feedback. Number one, at the beginning of the performance cycle, we want to establish and communicate specific performance standards. What are we looking for? Setting those objectives early, reinforcing them often so that we can stay on track. Number two, we want to observe the behavior and provide feedback over the entire performance cycle. And folks, I've talked quite a bit about the coaching phase. That's what this is all about, is coaching, providing that real-time feedback day in and day out. Next is we want to include balanced feedback, both positive and growth examples. And then last, when writing the evaluation, we want to choose a time when you can concentrate and complete the entire review without interruption. A lot of folks that I've worked with in the past will actually take this, will take this home. They'll do it in the evenings. So setting that time aside is very, very, very important to provide that value feedback. So in administering the evaluation, so now we've got it completed, we're getting ready to sit down with the individual. After the evaluation is written and approved,
it's time to discuss the review with the team member. So some special planning is required to ensure that you have enough quality time to spend with each team member. So first, you want to make sure that you're prepared. Come in with the information that you want to discuss. Come in with a mindset of being open and have the expectation that you're going to have a great conversation. Number two, you want to choose carefully the time and place of your meeting. During the meeting, you want to create a positive environment and help the team member to feel at ease. If there's anxiety on your end, there's also anxiety on their end. So create the conditions for success and give the team member time to respond. Again, this is a conversation, and being open to that is important. So sometimes when we're giving difficult feedback, there are some keys to helping to make this as easy as possible. Number one, address the issue as it occurs. Bad news does not get better over time. So if there's something that happens that needs to be addressed, go ahead and address it. Don't wait until review time to have the discussion. It can lead to questions of trust, of honesty, of openness. So give that difficult feedback right when it happens. And practice communicating feedback. Sometimes practicing giving positive feedback, knowing that there may be some difficult conversations down the road, helps you just to get more familiar and comfortable with that approach. Number four, don't build up the team member with praise and compliments before breaking the bad news. You know, there's kind of the idea out there of the sandwich model of feedback, that you give a positive comment and then you fill it up in the middle with developmental or negative feedback, and then you end the conversation with another positive comment. And unfortunately, employees see through this. So the reality is, just be honest. Be honest and open, and that will be seen as respecting the individual as opposed to trying to manipulate. Next is, feel free to say positive things about the team member's performance after communicating the bad news. So it is okay to say, you know what, we need to have a conversation about something that I need to see changed a little bit different. Once you get through that, you can validate them and give them that encouragement. If the team member challenges the observation, ask the team member to provide data and rationale to support his or her claim. Again, you're open to getting that feedback from them. So listen to what they had to say, but remember, you are owning your feedback of that individual. So make sure that you're thinking through that and communicating that in a positive way. You want to show empathy for the team member and allow emotions to be expressed. Sometimes tough feedback can be emotional for folks. And sometimes they'll get angry, sometimes they'll be resistant, sometimes they may cry. And just recognizing that this is part of their processing that and being sensitive during those times, again, is going to build an even stronger relationship for you. And then last is to provide clear expectations. If you're providing the feedback, be very clear on what you expect to see going forward. So when you're talking about future goals during the evaluation meeting, you'll then begin the process all over again of the planning. You'll agree on development areas and write new goals. This is also a good opportunity to schedule time during the next few months to discuss progress toward those goals. So remember, we're going to be coaching on a daily basis, providing that feedback, but I'm also a big advocate of some milestones of every 2 or 3 months. Let's sit down, talk about our progress toward our goals. How are you doing? So that it's a little bit more of a formal conversation, but not necessarily as formal as the documented performance evaluation. So in closing the evaluation, performance management done well involves time and effort. The increase in team member performance, attaining of team and company objectives, and the increase in morale in your area is well worth it. And when we think about the process, this is something that I've rolled out in many organizations and has worked very, very well in making sure that we keep that alignment. So when a new individual comes into an organization, take time to go over the performance evaluation process and tools. I lay everything out to them. I give them a copy of the performance review. I go over the competencies that have been developed for the organization, what they would expect, so that from the very first day that they are in the organization, they know what number one, our focus on performance management, but number two, what they need to be focused on to be successful. At the 90-day mark, we sit down, we have evaluations. They're structured but informal. So there's some very specific questions that the manager provides feedback on, but there's not necessarily a formal document that we're using. Mid-year evaluations are, again, very valuable. So at the 6-month mark, again, structured but informal. Annual evaluations are structured and formal. So again, a formal evaluation that looks at role-specific responsibilities, competencies, development plan, etc., are developed, and it becomes part of the employee's personnel file. And then, again, last but certainly not least, and hopefully that's a key takeaway from our time together today, is that coaching and follow-up is ongoing, day in and day out. So, in conclusion, here's the homework. What I would encourage you to do is think about what are the 3 most important things or ideas I discovered in this session. Number 2, what action will I take as a result of what I have learned, and by when? Number 3, what additional resources might I need to implement each action? And 4th, with whom do I need to share my plan, or who else can help me? So if you take some time at the conclusion of this webinar to answer these questions, you can take some of the core ideas and bring them into action for you to help you to be even more successful in linking performance management to business success. Dolores Ambrose said, "The responsibility of leadership is one of shaping our own and others' lives, hopefully for the better." And Gordon Forward said, "Real motivation comes from within. People have to be given the freedom to succeed or fail." And performance management provides the opportunity for both of those to come together, to lead individuals for success, to maximize their potential, to align them with organizational objectives. And my hope for today is that there are some takeaways that you can bring either in idea or practical that will make a difference for you and your organizations. Thanks so much, and I guess now we can open up for some questions.
Well, thank you very much, folks. We are now open for question and answers. If you have any questions, you could either put it in the question box, chat box, or you could equally raise your hand. Let me go straight to the first question. Normally, in this part of the world, performance management is primarily linked with your productive, quantified outputs related to work task goals, and we tend to ignore or does not score them high on the attributes linked to their personal growth, which they have demonstrated. What would you say to such line managers who ignore evaluating the improvements in employees' soft attributes?
That's a great question, and I appreciate the perspective of the tangible, quantifiable objectives as being, areas that you typically focus on. I would say this, that there needs to be balanced feedback in those. That ultimately, each one of us is an individual coming together to accomplish an organizational goal. And if we minimize the soft aspects, or the quote-unquote soft aspects of who we are, or providing the feedback on those type of things, or developing goals on that, it will ultimately lead to eroding success in some of the more quote-unquote hard goals and hard objectives. So, for example, if somebody is not working or playing well with others, I would bring that into the conversation to say, you know what, we really need to work on your communication skills, or we need to work on your effectiveness of teaming with others. Because if you don't communicate well, and if you don't work well with others, then it's ultimately going to end up negatively impacting your performance in some of these other areas. So being able to link the soft skills in with results on the hard skills, I think would lead to the greatest results.
Thank you very much. We have another one from Mr. Paul Greasley. The question is, thank you for your worthy presentation. How much time should a very, very busy manager spend on performance management? How should the process address all parts of a person, body, soul, and spirit?
I love that question. So, the fact of an already busy manager, I have a picture in my mind of somebody that is already giving so much of themselves to help the organization be successful and their team members to be successful. That's a tough question to say you should be spending X amount of time on this. But I would say this: if you focus on building the behaviors in yourself for coaching and for feedback and for documenting the performance, if you spend time on that right now and it becomes a habit for you, then it just becomes part of who you are, and you don't have to think as much about, okay, now I need to set time aside for performance management, and now I need to set time aside for this. It just starts to come naturally. When I think about the coaching, some of the most effective coaching that I have ever seen, or actually even been a part of, is when the employee is there working. They're at their workstation, they're at their desk, wherever, and the manager just comes up and says, hey, you know what, I just wanted to tell you how much I appreciated what you did. Again, specific, it's a 10-second conversation, a 15-second conversation, but it makes such an impact. What I would say, too, is, gosh, I mean, even if it is, a couple of times during the day where you sit down for 10 minutes, make that a part of your day where you're just jotting down some notes on your team members. Again, establish the disciplines. It's going to be a lot easier to carve out that time, and you're going to see incredible value.
Thank you very much. Another one, what are some of the common mistakes evaluators make in evaluating performance of their teams?
Yeah, I'll mention a couple of those. There's several. There's one trap that evaluators fall into. I like to call it's a similar to me approach, or similar to me trap, that we overestimate the positive attributes of somebody if they are more like us, okay, and we underestimate the positive attributes of somebody if they are different than us. So let's just say somebody is very outgoing and friendly, and they're kind of the social person in the work group, and I, as a manager, am the same way. I'm very outgoing. I'm gregarious. I like to talk to people. We may focus on those behaviors instead of the actual outcomes, because we like that person more and overestimate their performance. Another is what we call the halo and horn effect, and essentially what this is if somebody is we overestimate the good in what they do as opposed to providing that balanced feedback. So there's similar to me trap. There's a halo and horn effect that we have to be aware of, and I can share even more information through the webinar notes on some of these traps that folks can fall into.
Okay, thank you very much. Another one. As an HR manager, how should I address a concern when an employee compares his or her evaluation with others in the team and why he or she was not evaluated fairly? Is comparison a legal tone in an HR department?
That's a great question. And here's how I've handled that in the past. From an HR standpoint, we need to first ask the question, all right, is there balanced feedback that has been provided? So, if an employee came to me and said, you know what, I don't think I was evaluated fairly on this, I would ask the question, so help me understand where you think that's coming from. And then, off to the side, I would probably go back to the manager and say, hey, walk me through your process. Tell me about how you ensure that you're capturing accurate information on all of your employees. So just kind of see what's going on. Now, I would say, for me, I would have the conversation with that employee to let them know that, again, performance and feedback on performance is my perspective on what I see in you. Okay, so if there's a disconnect, number one, as the manager, I need to own that feedback and let the employee know that this is what I've seen. But I think it calls into question a bigger issue that there is not. That coaching piece is not working well, and there's clearly a disconnect in where the employee sees where they are and where the manager sees where they are. But again, from an HR standpoint, there is a legal piece of ensuring consistency, but then from a performance management piece and from a foundational aspect of this, each manager's evaluation is their own personal assessment. And I'm kind of going along these same lines. I'm just going to kind of throw this out. I'm a firm believer that no one cares about your performance as an employee as much as you do. And I think a lot of times employees will put the responsibility on the manager to say, I'm going to let you drive the process. I'm going to let you do all this. I'm just going to sit back and wait for you to have a conversation with me. And something that I've always done in organizations that I've worked with is reinforce to the employee group, if you're not hearing from your manager, you take the responsibility to set up those meetings, to ask them what I call the three big questions. What's working well, what's not working well, and what could I be doing different that would be better? And that then takes the responsibility off one individual, i.e. the manager, to take care of all of this and put it back out to the employee to say, we're in this together. No one cares about your performance as much as you do. Help me to be even better for you in providing that feedback. So that's just a couple of things kind of along those lines.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Jason Brooks. That really brings us towards the end of the webinar. Any concluding remarks that you would like to give before we discuss out?
Well, I'm just excited for the folks that have been part of this webinar, and my hope is that it's given you some general insights, but also some practical pieces for you to be able to move forward with really making this a part of your organization, because ultimately, the more successful each person is, the more successful we're going to be as a company. And if there's anything that I can do to provide, insight and support and encouragement, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm available on social media, on LinkedIn, or the Catalyst Group website.
Well, thank you very much, and I really want to thank you on behalf of the Medina Institute for Leadership and Entrepreneurship for sharing a very, very interesting presentation. So thank you very much, and thank you all of those who participated in this webinar. We are recording it. Please stay tuned to webinar.mile.org to learn about our upcoming programs and webinars, and equally to access the archive section. With that note, I would like to end and conclude the session, so you all will be automatically dismissed out. You all have a good day.